Cross-Guild Davy Back Fight.
What's up, y'all? You know what time it is? It's about to be that time.
Most would argue that Blackbeard, outside of Luffy, is the closest to getting the One Piece, that he will be Luffy's main opposition at Laugh Tale. But I'm willing to argue that Buggy is actually the closest outside of Luffy. And that may sound like a joke, but legitimately, Buggy is one of, if not Oda's favorite character in the entire series. So I don't see an opportunity where Oda doesn't include him in the very end game, especially considering that he was Luffy's first real opponent. He never made it to Laugh Tale, so Oda's got to follow through on that. Buggy's got to see what the One Piece was, because he didn't get to with Roger, meaning that Shanks probably also does too. So are all four of the Yonko at Laugh Tale at the end of this story? It's very possible. With the introduction of the Cross Guild into the story, which, by the way, is now my new favorite faction of all time, comprising of so many of my favorite characters, how do they catch up to everyone else? Blackbeard and Shanks both have a leg up on the Cross Guild by having rubbings that will lead them to Laugh Tale. They may not have all four, but they've got a leg up, meaning that the Cross Guild has to catch up. And how better to do that than a Davy Back Fight against the Straw Hats? And maybe by the end of this video I'll convince you too, but first, like, comment, subscribe if you are feeling the vibe. Wealth, fame, power. Those are the words that Roger uttered. And all members of the Cross Guild so far were present for those words. They were there at the execution, and they each embody one of those individual words. Wealth is definitely Crocodile. The man owned a casino, and a Davy Back Fight is a gambling game. You gamble your crew, you gamble your flag, you gamble your pride. Fame is Buggy. He's been failing upwards the entire series, and no matter what he does, he seems to put himself front and center and get all of the credit.
Sometimes you hear people talking about failing upwards. I think I'm about to do that.
And power is Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman. How could he not be the embodiment of that strength? And what if a Cross-Guild Davy Back Fight is how Zoro steals that title from him? More on that. A Cross-Guild Davy Back Fight is the perfect way to have Buggy be a threat without being a physically imposing threat. He can utilize his crew of circus performers to play circus games. And knowing that he is not as physically capable as some other people in the Cross Guild, I believe that Buggy would substitute Mihawk for the combat round of the Davy Back Fight, choosing to be more of an officiator, the announcer, the game master, rather than actually participating in the games themselves. This would be a fun callback and inversion to when Luffy Gum Gum substituted Buggy to take that hit from Mihawk in Marineford. Here, Buggy would be substituting Mihawk to essentially take a hit from Luffy in theory. And knowing that Mihawk would be the combat representative of the Cross Guild, Zoro and Luffy would have to have a dialogue where Zoro would basically tell Luffy, hey, this is a different situation than we had back in Long Ring Longland. You can't be the combat guy. This isn't you versus Foxy. Mihawk is my guy. I have to go and do this. And Luffy, knowing that this is Zoro's dream, would fall back and be like, hey man, this is you, just don't lose. You got this. Leaving Luffy to have to participate in a different game. One that I would hope he loses. Because once again, it is not about power when you're going up against circus performers. So if it's a situation where, say, Kabaji is hosting a unicycling game, but Luffy doesn't have the coordination, maneuverability, or the understanding to go up against a unicyclist, right? This is just a, a wacky example, but it's built into the story, right? Luffy couldn't ride the Waver in Skypiea, so why would he be able to ride a unicycle? But since he already agreed to being in the first round, he loses. Now, some fun alternative games would be like one of those strength-based games that you would see at, different circuses where you have to hit the hammer and then the thing rises and hits the bell at the top. A fun thing there would be Usopp using his hammer with an impact dial on it and blowing the thing off. That would be fun, but we don't want everybody to win, right? But I could also see, I would love a situation where Frankie, dressed like a vaudeville guy, is in a strength competition against, say, Moji. These are fun little elements and things that could happen, but for this construction of the way that I'm making the cross-scaled Davy Back Fight, I'm saying unicycle battle against Kabaji, and Luffy loses. And the inversion here basically would be that where during the Long Ring Longland Davy Back Fight, Luffy was the last key to get his crewmate back, here it would be that Luffy is responsible for losing a crewmate, and then it's up to the rest of the crew to get that crew member back. So it sits on Luffy, he cannot do anything about it, and that eats at him and we get drama. And why would it be important for Luffy to lose? Because the Cross Guild needs to steal a member of our crew, right? They're going to be after one thing, and that's the poneglyph rubbings. But on the road to get there, if they can steal one of our crew members, they will. And this is how you add tension into the story. In SBS's and in the color walks, Oda once revealed that amongst the original crew members of Buggy in his original notes, Oda was going to have Roanoa Zoro be a member of Buggy's crew. I would love to see a reference and callback to that, which is also in the thumbnail of this video, so you already probably knew where I was going with this. But if Buggy chooses Zoro to be the first character that he takes, there's actually a galaxy-brained reason for this as well that is built into the original Davy Back Fight. When Zoro and Sanji won the Groggy Ring, there was murmuring and everybody was saying, hey Luffy, just pick Foxy, because then you don't have to fight him, we already win, we get Chopper back automatically. But Oda doesn't want Luffy to cheat, and Luffy doesn't want Foxy on his crew. So he goes and he has the third act battle anyway. He just grabs Chopper, he's like, I'll win this no matter what. But Buggy's built differently. If he knows that Zoro is going to go up against Mihawk in the combat round, Buggy will choose Zoro to make sure that all he needs to do at that point is win the Groggy Ring in the second round, and then by default, Mihawk wins. Over and done with. And harping on this and the drama of it all, right? What happened during the Davy Back Fight when Chopper was taken? Zoro had this great speech yelling at Chopper, telling him to be a man and stop complaining about leaving the crew and being a part of another crew. He set out on this journey, he made his own choices, and he has to live with them. So in this instance, Zoro would say nothing and would just go and join, leaving it in the hands of his crew to get him back. There's no sense in complaining. To go deeper, not only was Zoro intended to be on Buggy's crew, he was intended to be Buggy's specific bodyguard. So it would be really interesting to see that come into play. Imagine a scenario where Luffy is upset with Buggy taking Zoro and tries to pick a fight with Buggy. And then without skipping a beat, Zoro goes to defend his new captain, sort of echoing the idea of what he was yelling at Chopper about in the first place, like, hey, you're a part of that crew now, so you need to embrace that. Zoro doing this is also a big brain way for him to explain to the crew without words how serious this is and kick them into gear to get him back. It would be a fun way to get a few quick blows between Luffy and Zoro for all the power scalers before Nami or somebody else steps in and reminds them that they have to get to the Groggy Ring. Now the fun part of this is the Groggy Ring. This is an opportunity to platform the weakling trio. Now in the original construction of the Davy Back Fight, the Groggy Ring was supposed to be Zoro, Sanji, and Chopper. Chopper was taken, so that's why it was a 2-on-3. In this, I would want it to be a 3-on-3 battle, but it really is Usopp, Nami, and Chopper, because the people that I would want them to fight are Balvita, Mr. 1, and Mr. 3. And in this version, I would have Mr. 3 and Chopper be the ball. There are so many fun things to do here because there is a danger level. Particularly Mr. 1 would be the most dangerous person to go up against, but Mr. 3 would create so many different obstacles like wax walls, wax duplicates, wax swords, all types of things that would prevent them from getting the ball into the other side, while trying to defend themselves against the dangers of Mr. 1. Alvida poses a threat as well because her slip fruit makes her so fast, and if she is able to affect other environments, you know, not to say that she's awakened, but if she can make things slippery for them as well, it just creates this added tension. Like, oh man, are we really going to lose out on all of this? This would be the highest stakes situation in the entire series, because if the weakling trio loses here, not only do they lose Zoro, but they lose all of their rubbings, so they have no way to get to Laugh Tale. It is on Usopp, Nami, and Chopper's shoulders to beat these people and get Mr. 3 into that groggy ring. I would love to see different scenarios, like them calling out that since Zeus is sentient, they get a red card or a yellow card, and then Nami cannot use Zeus because it's technically a fourth player. And then them calling out all of the wax duplicates that Mr. 3 would make, but saying, hey, they're not sentient, so it's okay. And for this iteration of the groggy ring, we're just going to ignore the no weapons rule, because Foxy's crew ignored it anyway, so I'm kind of on the fence if it's even really a rule. And if we have Mr. 1 involved here, he's literally a weapon, so let's just have fun. And ultimately, you would get a situation where the weakling trio has to work together in order to win. Because if Alvida is making things slippery, and Mr. 3 is potentially shackling people, and we have to figure out a way out of that, and Usopp with Flamebird stars and things like that, he might be able to melt the wax and be a good counter for that. But Mr. 1 being as dangerous as he is, they have to figure out some way to incapacitate him. Maybe Usopp has some sort of pop green that's able to tie him up. Nami, because he is metal, is able to electrocute him, and then we're able to get Mr. 1 out. Like, that would actually be pretty crazy if Mr. 1 got low diffed by Nami. But you just build up this danger and this tension where there's no way these guys are actually going to win, and then they do pull it off by working together. Usopp creates a pop green trampoline that Chopper uses jump point to jump on, and then while Mr. 3 is like in his wax ball form from Alabasta, you just get Chopper like spiking the ball down. And you know, to make things even more epic, Chopper has to go monster point for that final volley, hitting Mr. 3 into the groggy ring and getting the goal. This would also be a visual reference to what happened pre-time skip, where you had Big Pan, a giant creature, as the loser. You would have Chopper, a giant creature, as the winner. It allows the weakling trio to be responsible for everybody still being able to get to Laugh Tale and reuniting the crew. Reaffirming that Luffy put together an amazing team of people, and that it's not just on his shoulders. He chose people that he truly can rely on, freeing Zoro to come back to the crew and compete in the combat against Mihawk, and still keeping the highest stakes in the series, because not only will Zoro become the world's greatest swordsman if he wins this, if he loses this, they cannot get to Laugh Tale. Right before joining the crew, Zoro told Luffy that he had plans to be the world's greatest swordsman, and if Luffy were to do anything to get in the way of that dream, he would kill him. Luffy responded by saying if Zoro couldn't do something as small as become the world's greatest swordsman, Luffy would be embarrassed as well. With the poneglyph rubbings in the balance, Zoro's battle with Mihawk is standing in the way of Luffy's dream. Unless Zoro becomes the world's greatest swordsman, Luffy can never become the Pirate King. But where does Crocodile work in this construction, right? Because obviously Crocodile is the brains of the Cross Guild. Well, the whole Davy Back Fight would be a decoy for Crocodile to steal the rubbings anyway, because he doesn't believe that Buggy and his circus people are going to pull this off. But this is where things get spicy and things get fun too, because if Crocodile went to the Sunny and was trying to steal the rubbings, it's a great opportunity to bring back Mr. Prince.
Sashiburi da na, Mr. Zero.
Fun fact, Crocodile and Sanji have never met. They only talked on the phone, they never met. So it's a really fun chance for Crocodile to call Sanji Mr. Prince, a fight between Sanji and Crocodile. Imagine Ifrit Jambay or just Diable Jambay heating up Crocodile's sand to glass levels and breaking it. Let's be smart about this. Let's use the properties at hand. Not only should water be able to hurt Crocodile, but extreme heat should turn him into glass. And then he shatters, maybe he T-1000s himself back together. In Marvel Comics, the villain Sandman was turned into glass several times, often by the Human Torch. This usually was used as a technique to incapacitate him, however one comic run had him essentially become Glass Man and manipulate the glass. So how cool would it be to have a Jozu-like version of Crocodile, but firing shards of glass at his opponents, or in this case, Sanji? Maybe it's not a completely effective way to dispatch him, maybe water, is just the better version of it all, but it still would be a really difficult fight, and just something really cool, really fun to see. Two of my favorite characters going up against each other. One of the interesting things about having a Crocodile and Sanji fight is that during the entire Baroque Works saga, Sanji goes completely under the radar. This is how he's eventually able to infiltrate Rain Dinners as Mr. Prince in the first place. Mr. 2 never meets him, Mr. 3 never meets him. No one in Baroque Works even knows he exists, right? So if Crocodile takes that role upon himself and becomes the sneaky guy during the Davy Back Fight, it's a fun inversion. It wouldn't be a Davy Back Fight 2.0 if we didn't get the return of Afro Luffy. During his fight with Lucci on Egghead, Luffy made goggles materialize out of thin air, so I feel it's well within his wheelhouse to just materialize an afro as well, and maybe turn his hands into boxing gloves, and boom, Gear 5 Afro Luffy. Luffy would have to get some action at some point, so a rematch against Buggy would be kind of fun, and if it brought back his most powerful transformation of all time, all the better, especially if it gets interrupted by a third party entering the whole machinations here. Blackbeard shows up, Shanks shows up, something, leading us to Laugh-Tale anyway. Maybe we come to an agreement and they just come with us. I don't know. It's up to Oda to decide exactly how he wants the story to go, but there are so many fun ways for this to work, especially if Zoro does beat Mihawk here. Wow. Or, speaking of which, if things get interrupted by a third party like Blackbeard shows up, then that pushes the fight to have to happen between Zoro and Mihawk at Laugh-Tale. Maybe I like that better, actually. Like, they start fighting, it's a great fight, but it gets put on pause, and they have to finish it at Laugh-Tale. So now it's like, not only are we fighting to be the world's greatest swordsman, we're also fighting for the One Piece in general. And what would make this even easier for someone to interrupt this battle is if the entire Davy Back Fight happens on Elbaf. We know that Elbaf is the next location that we're going to go after Egghead, theoretically, and one of Crocodile's big drives, going back to the Alabasta saga, was Pluton, right? He is very interested in the ancient weapons. So if there is information on Elbaf about the ancient weapons, then that also gets us the same effect. Whether or not Crocodile is actually going for the rubbings, maybe he is sneaking around Elbaf trying to find information on the ancient weapons, and that's where Sanji goes and has some sort of an interaction with him. Throughout the story, we have been getting hints that Caribou is going to be relaying information about the ancient weapons to someone. He has a contact. Everybody theorizes, and the Occam's razor is that he's going to tell Blackbeard this information. But my pick has been Crocodile. I want Caribou to be a spy for Crocodile. And this is further informed when you go back to those early notes. Just like Zoro originally being planned to be a part of Buggy's crew, coming out through SBS and color walk drawings and all of that, Oda drew what Mr. 10 from the Baroque works was originally supposed to look like. And you cannot tell me that that image doesn't look like a hypothetical pre-time skip Caribou. So if Caribou this entire time, all the way back at Fishman Island, has been talking about Crocodile, the character that introduced us to the idea of ancient weapons, then we have a really full circle situation that feels right to me. It's a twist, it's not the obvious choice, but when you really think about it, it's the obvious choice. At the time of this video's release, the Cross Guild has only been introduced to anime onlys. So I'm going to get into some ideas and theories that involve manga spoilers from this point forward. I do not believe that Blackbeard and Shanks need anything from Luffy at this point. Blackbeard has already got the rubbings from Law, Shanks has the rubbings from Kid. Blackbeard has Pudding on his team, and through things that Big Mom has hinted at, if Pudding is to awaken her third eye, she should be able to read the poneglyphs. Now, we don't know what Shanks' deal is, maybe he does need Robin, but a Davy Back fight against that group would only feel like an exhibition, Luffy being tested by Shanks. I'd rather them actually have a battle against Shanks' crew. That's how Luffy, in my mind, thinks of being a great pirate to Shanks anyway, is strength-based. And that's further emphasized by we only ever see Shanks talk about Luffy generally when he gets a bounty increase, because it's indicative of not only his strength, but his threat level to the world government. So that's what their relationship is. That's why a Davy Back fight against the Cross Guild is so fun, because there's more elements and they need something. They need poneglyphs, they need rubbings. They have announced that they are going to go after the One Piece, and they are very far behind. Now, I do expect the crew of the Cross Guild to expand and to include other warlords, especially Moria, by way of Perona. Perona may think that Mihawk will be able to protect them, so she may pull up to Empty Bluffs with Moria, and then you would have another person that was at Roger's execution with them there as a member of the Cross Guild. Doflamingo was also at the execution, so if we do get Impel Down 2.0, which seems to be heavily implied with Marco heading to Impel Down to break out Weevil, Doflamingo getting out at the same time isn't that far-fetched to me. So does Doflamingo and some of the Doflamingo family end up becoming a part of Cross Guild as well? And then we have Senor Pink and Gladius and some of these other characters going to Laugh-Tale as well. It's kind of funny, but it's a way to really amp up the end and throw some familiar faces and create a final war worthy of being called a final war. Not just on the Marine side and the world government side, but on the pirate side as well. And that's gonna wrap things up, guys. The chances of none of this happening are way greater than any of it actually happening. But the goal today was to create, manufacture, fabricate a story that really gives so many characters that are underutilized and may end up underserviced by the end of the story. It's a way to give them something special to do, so that when this story does end, we don't feel like we were missing something. All of these side characters, these weaker characters, the characters that could be forgotten, they get a moment that really matters to the end game of the story. We wouldn't have been able to get to Laugh-Tale if the Weakling Trio didn't do this. We wouldn't have been able to get this if this didn't happen, or that. That's the stuff that's really interesting to me, but I want to hear what's interesting to you in the comments, whether you agree with this video, whether you disagree, what your thoughts on a Davy Back fight return would be, who it would be against, maybe some other games that could be played or fun interactions that we could think about and maybe even talk about in a stream later. And big shout out to channel artist Dan Dicarlo for all of the awesome art that he did for this video. Be sure to follow him. Links are in the description. That's it for me, and thanks for hanging out. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe.
I've been swimming deep, deep. Savage.